Today's reading comes from John chapter 6. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now, the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that are left, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. Have you ever been certain that the best you had to give wasn't enough? At a time when we're feeling ever more stretched and stressed, I suspect a lot of us feel that way a lot of the time. Jesus looks out over the hot, tired, dusty crowd and knows that he and the disciples should feed them. He does not blame them for their own hunger, chastising them for following them on a journey without bringing enough supplies. Jesus sees the people and doesn't question whether he and the disciples should feed them. He doesn't expect that the people have their own bread. He doesn't complain that they couldn't possibly have enough money to feed everyone. Instead, he asks where they can get some bread, with the implication that they'll be able to figure out a way to make this happen. Jesus perhaps knew what he was about to do, but the disciples didn't. Philip knew they couldn't possibly afford to feed all the hungry people who had shown up to be healed. He knew they didn't have nearly enough. Jesus and the disciples were tired and hungry, and now they were faced with a monumental crowd, just as tired and hungry as they were, and no way to meet their overwhelming need. It was Andrew who said, "Look, there's someone here who at least has a little. Perhaps we can feed a few people if we share what is already here." But even as he said it, he was second-guessing himself, understanding fully that there simply was not enough food in the boy's basket to feed so many people. The disciples looked at the enormity of the problem and were certain that there was nothing that could be done. And yet, the disciples knew that Jesus had somehow managed to turn water into wine in the wedding at Cana. Here, among the 5,000 hungry people, a story so compelling it makes it into all 4 Gospels, Jesus uses what is already there and makes what is already there into enough. John is careful to tell us that the loaves were barley loaves, hearty, not soft white bread. This is the kind of bread that sticks to your ribs. And while Matthew, Mark, and Luke use the Greek word ichthys to describe the fish, John uses opsarion, the Greek word for dried fish. This is important because it means that this was the food of hunger and necessity, food that could keep until it was needed, not the fresh food of decadent celebrations. Jesus was meeting a real need with real food, and the food didn't have to be transformed into something more special to meet that need. This was everyday stuff. Not only is Jesus working with the ordinary food of the poor, but Jesus doesn't transform the loaves and fish into a sumptuous feast fit for a king. He meets the people where they are and serves their most urgent need with what is there. What they have is enough. What they need is already in their midst. Just as God provided enough manna and quails for the Israelites to survive their 40 years in the wilderness, just as the 20 loaves Elisha had were enough for a crowd of 100, just as God provided the widow of Zarephath enough oil and grain to survive a famine when she dared to share what little she had with the prophet Elijah, God provides enough in this moment for this assembled community. There is nothing that God cannot do with a few pieces of broken bread. God comes to us in the simplest of meals every week, reminding us that we are part of a community rooted in grace and that there's nothing we can do to deserve it. When you feel like your best can't possibly be good enough, God makes it enough. If you're feeling stretched or stressed right now, or when we get into September and October and you realize just how much is on your plate, remember this story and hang on to it. What is in you, God will make it enough. You've got a community around you that is here to listen and help, and you're not alone. God, who is all around us, comes to us in boring, everyday ways and reminds us that we do not have to be anyone other than who we are. We do not have to be perfect in order to be good enough. God comes to us in broken pieces of bread, pieces that were never meant to be perfect. When what we have seems like it could never be enough, God uses what we already have. God takes our brokenness and turns it into abundance. Amen.